everyone. So, VEDA is ending really soon. We have 3 days left. Well, 2, not counting today. And as always, it feels like the end of something really big, which is possibly amplified by the fact that next week is also my last week of classes. Ever? That feels really weird to say, and I had no inkling that that was coming up so soon. And it is mildly terrifying. So I wanted to kind of think back on the semester at least. One of the classes I'm taking is called Symbolic Music Computing, as I think I have mentioned before. And we've been talking a lot about algorithmic composition recently. We started off with a lot of analysis stuff, and recently we've just been kind of looking at different pieces that people have written. This week, our professor introduced to us this really awesome piece that I absolutely adore. And it's based off this math problem, which you may or may not have heard of. I certainly hadn't because I don't remember math, but it's called Narayana's Cows, and I will provide a link up in the card thing, something like that. Don't know how YouTube works anymore, and also down in the doobly-doo. But I highly recommend you check it out because it's awesome and kind of silly, and it's just a very simple and kind of clear example of this kind of music. And we also looked at some music by Arvo Pärt, which I may have mentioned before. He has this really cool technique called tintinnabuli. It involves this central chord that is constantly being played, but then what note of the chord is being played is completely dependent on this kind of formula where different notes that are played in another part map to one of the notes in the chord. And the example that we looked at in class was a piece called Spiegel im Spiegel, which translates to mirror in mirror. And that's the key to the piece. The different parts kind of mirror each other, but it just overall becomes this really calming thing, which I will also link in the doobly-doo and in the card, wherever that is. And our professor actually went and coded the entire piece, which is kind of funny because it just shows how exact the composition was. And I guess to clarify, the idea of algorithmic composition is basically you have kind of formulas for what happens, and then when each event happens, that event basically leads to the next thing happening. We kind of made an algorithmic piece as an assignment, but my piece was not very good, so I'm not gonna show you guys. The last thing that we were doing in class is pretty much working on a final project, which my group just had a meeting for with our TA, who also happens to be in the laptop orchestra, which I'm in. Part of our project is trying to figure out ways to map linguistic elements into a piece of music, and to create a piece of music from that. So I'm currently working on a thing to take some old Renaissance stuff and analyze it and figure out just how often different patterns happen, chord progressions, for those of you who know what that is. And hopefully we'll end up making something cool. We're thinking of doing some semantic analysis maybe, and also just on the level of letters, how consonant sound might affect how the music goes, and how many vowels there are, that kind of thing. But Chris, who is our TA, found it really interesting, and hopefully we'll be able to progress on that. And speaking of the laptop orchestra, we also have this really cool laser piece thing, which is cool mostly for the lasers. A couple of other kids in this class are also in the group, and we kind of made it together-ish, but mostly one person wrote the instrument and another person is working on kind of generating some algorithmically created stuff for the beginning and middle of the song, which will become this Renaissance piece. So there's a commonality here. I am the one person in the class who hasn't really been doing anything. I will definitely try to see if there's recordings of our performance next week. I guess that's all for today. Check out these cool pieces I mentioned. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!